The shadow burn had claimed 47 Omegas in the last century. It would have claimed her too if they hadn't found her. Mist clung to the ancient forest like a burial shroud, swallowing the last rays of twilight. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and decay, broken only by the occasional rustle of nocturnal creatures beginning their hunt. The temperature had dropped steadily throughout the day, turning the mountain wilderness into a maze of shadow and silence for any creature unfortunate enough to be caught alone in its depths. Miry Shadowglow stumbled forward, each step an agony that threatened to bring her to her knees. Her breath came in ragged gasps, forming pale clouds that vanished too quickly in the cooling air. The fever should have been her greatest enemy, but it was the darkness consuming her from within that was killing her. The Omega's wolf should have blessed her, should have been her strength and salvation. Instead, the shadow burn was tearing her apart cell by cell, her body rejecting the very essence it was meant to embrace. "Not like this," she gasped, the words barely audible even to her own ears. Her fingers clutched at the rough bark of a moss-covered oak, nails digging deep into the ancient wood. "Please, not like this." Her legs finally surrendered. Miry collapsed onto the forest floor, auburn hair spilling across the fallen leaves like copper on velvet. The cool earth felt almost soothing against her burning skin, a momentary respite from the inferno raging within. Her wolf, meant to be her companion, her other half, was instead becoming her executioner. As consciousness began to slip away, the shadows around her seemed to deepen with an unnatural darkness. Through blurred vision she glimpsed two massive silhouettes approaching through the mist. Not human, not entirely. The shadows moved with preternatural synchronization, undaunted by the wilderness that had nearly claimed her. Then darkness took her completely. Ryder Vance felt the presence of another wolf long before he caught her scent. Even through the gathering darkness and thick mist, his senses remained sharp, a remnant of the alpha he had once been. He had come to these mountains to escape such things, to live his remaining years in isolation with only his twin for company. Yet here was the world intruding once again. The scent hit him suddenly, a desperate sweetness laced with the acrid tang of sickness that cut through the damp earth and pine. An Omega dying alone, her wolf essence turning against her. Instinct took over before conscious thought could intervene. "Ryder," his twin's voice cut through the silence, low and urgent. Rylan had sensed it too. His bones shifted, muscles elongating as his wolf form emerged for the first time in weeks, massive paws carrying him swiftly through undergrowth that would have trapped a human. Behind him, Rylan moved in perfect unison, their twin bond pulsing with shared purpose. When they found her, something ancient and long dormant stirred within both of them. She lay crumpled on the forest floor, a young woman no more than 23, her body betrayed by the very nature meant to empower her. The emerald and gold of her garments stood out against the earth like a jewel abandoned in darkness. Ryder shifted back to human form, ignoring the chill against his skin as he knelt beside her. Rylan circled them once, twice, his silver-gray wolf form scanning the perimeter with lethal alertness. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath Ryder's fingertips, her skin burning with unnatural heat. This was no ordinary sickness. This was shadow burn, the legendary condition that devoured Omegas from within. Fatal. Always fatal. Without hesitation he gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "Hold on," he murmured, voice rough from years of limited use. "Just hold on." Rylan shifted back to human form, his expression grim as he met his twin's gaze. The unspoken question hung between them. Why save her? They had sworn off the world of pacts and politics 8 years ago. They had learned the hard way that caring led only to betrayal and ash. But as Ryder adjusted his grip on the dying Omega, his hand pressed against her forehead, and for a single impossible moment, the rage and grief that had consumed them both since the massacre quieted. Rylan's eyes widened. He felt it too through their twin bond, the sudden, inexplicable calm radiating from her touch. "Move," Ryder commanded, and they did. The journey back to their cabin took longer than Ryder would have liked. Even with his enhanced strength, the girl weighed almost nothing in his arms, all fragile bones and burning skin. But the forest had become treacherous in full darkness, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead. Ryder relied on instinct and memory, tracing the path he had walked countless times during their 8 years of self-imposed exile. Rylan ranged ahead, clearing branches and testing the stability of the rocky terrain. Their cabin appeared through the mist like a sanctuary, a sturdy structure of timber and stone that stood defiant against the wilderness, built by their own hands. After they had abandoned their responsibilities, their pack, their very identity as alphas of the Vance bloodline, after they had lost everything worth living for and everyone they had trusted, this place had become their tomb. Rydor shouldered the door open, the warmth of the interior a stark contrast to the chill outside. The fire in the hearth had burned low, but still offered enough light to illuminate the sparse furnishings. Two rough-hewn chairs positioned on opposite sides of the room, a table laden with maps they never consulted, shelves holding weapons they hoped never to use again, the home of two men who expected no visitors, who wanted none. Rydor laid the girl gently on the fur rug before the hearth, then moved quickly to stoke the fire. Rylan secured the door and lit the oil lamps, bathing the cabin in warm, golden light. As the flames grew, illuminating her face fully for the first time, both twins froze. Even consumed by fever, even dying, she was breathtaking. But it was more than beauty that held them transfixed. It was the impossible sense of recognition, as if some part of them had been waiting for her without knowing it. Rydor knelt beside her again, and this time Rylan joined him on her other side. When Rylan's hand touched her wrist to check her pulse, the same inexplicable calm washed over him, the first peace either of them had felt since the night their pack burned. "What is she?" Rylan whispered. Rydor's jaw tightened as he studied the dark veins spreading beneath her translucent skin, the unmistakable signature of Shadowburn in its final stages. "Dying," he said flatly. "She's dying." But even as he said it, he knew they wouldn't let her. Couldn't. Not when her touch offered the first glimpse of healing they'd experienced in 8 years of drowning in trauma and rage. The question was no longer whether to save her. The question was what price all three of them would pay for the salvation she might bring. The girl didn't wake for 3 hours. Rydor spent that time pacing the length of the cabin like a caged predator while Rylan kept vigil beside her, monitoring the steady deterioration of her condition. The dark veins had spread from her wrists to her shoulders, creeping up her neck like poisonous vines. Her breathing grew shallower with each passing minute. "It's accelerating," Rylan said quietly, not looking up from where he'd pressed 2 fingers against her pulse point. "I've never seen Shadowburn progress this fast." Rydor stopped mid-stride, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He knew what his twin was implying. They both knew. There were only 3 options for an Omega dying of Shadowburn, and none of them were acceptable. "We could let her go peacefully," Rylan continued, his voice carefully neutral. "She's not in pain anymore. The fever has burned through most of her awareness." "No." The word came out harsher than Rydor intended. He forced himself to breathe, to think past the inexplicable instinct screaming at him to protect this stranger. "What's the second option?" Rylan finally looked up, his expression grim. "A claiming. A permanent mate bond would stabilize her wolf, force her body to accept the transformation. It's worked before with Shadowburn victims. A 3-way claiming." Rydor's voice was flat. "With 2 alphas she's never met. 2 exiled alphas with more blood on their hands than." "She'd live," Rylan interrupted. "Isn't that what matters?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with 8 years of shared grief and guilt. A permanent bond meant opening themselves to another person, risking attachment, risking loss. It meant binding this dying girl to their darkness forever. "The third option," Rydor said finally. "Tell me there's a third option." Rylan stood slowly, his face shadowed in the firelight. "Twin resonance healing. The old ritual from before the Pack Wars. It creates a temporary bond, 6 to 8 weeks at most, just long enough to stabilize her wolf without the permanence of a claiming. And the cost? It's killed alphas before. The synchronization required between twins, the amount of life force it demands." Rylan's voice dropped. "Father told me it was forbidden for a reason. Too many twins burned themselves out attempting it, left themselves vulnerable to enemies, to madness." Rydor moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. Behind him, he heard the girl's breathing hitch, weaken further. They were running out of time. "We do the ritual," he said. "Rydor." "We're already dead, brother." Rydor turned back, his eyes blazing with decision. "We've been dead since the night the pack burned. If this kills us, at least we die doing something that matters instead of rotting in this tomb." Before Rylan could respond, a soft, broken sound came from the floor. The girl's eyes had opened, fever-bright and unfocused but aware. Her cracked lips moved, forming words that were barely whispers. "Please," Myri Shadowglow breathed, her gaze finding first Rydor then Rylan. "Whatever it takes. I don't want to die alone." The twins looked at each other across the cabin, their bond pulsing with shared resolve. They had made their choice before she'd even asked. "You won't," Rydor promised, kneeling beside her. "We'll try the ritual. But you need to understand it might not work. It might kill all three of us." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Better than dying alone." Rylan moved to the far wall, pulling down a locked wooden chest he hadn't opened in 8 years. Inside lay the ritual components their father had given them: sacred herbs, binding stones, the silver blade required for blood sharing. His hands trembled as he gathered them. "Then we begin now," Rylan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through their bond. "Before her wolf surrenders completely." Myri's eyes drifted closed again, but this time there was something like hope in the set of her jaw, the way her fingers curled against the fur beneath her. The twins began to prepare, knowing that by dawn they would either save her, or join her in death. They cleared the floor in silence, pushing back the furniture until only bare stone remained. Rylan used salt and crushed wolfsbane to draw the sacred circle, his hand steady despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. Rydor stripped to the waist, then helped Myri out of her emerald dress, leaving her in a simple shift that wouldn't interfere with the energy flow. The ritual required skin contact, blood contact, soul contact. "The circle must remain unbroken once we begin," Rylan said, discarding his own shirt and kneeling across from his twin. Myri lay between them, her breathing shallow but steady. "If any of us breaks the connection before the bond forms, the backlash will kill us all." Rydor nodded, taking his position. He placed one hand on Myri's chest, directly over her heart. Rylan mirrored him on the opposite side. Their free hands reached across her body to clasp each other's forearms, completing the triangle. "Valar Ennis Twin Keth," Rydor began, the old tongue feeling foreign after years of disuse. "Sola Verthats Omega Keth." "Blood to blood," Rylan continued, his voice dropping into the same resonant chant. "Soul to soul." Their father had taught them the words when they were boys, never imagining they'd need them. The ritual was meant for times of desperate alliance, when a pack hung on the edge of extinction and only the combined power of twin alphas could save it. This was different. More intimate. More dangerous. Rylan drew the silver blade across his palm, then Rydor's. Blood welled hot and red. Together they pressed their bleeding hands against Myri's heart, their combined essence seeping through the thin fabric of her shift to touch her skin. The world exploded into fire and light. Myri's scream tore through the cabin as the bond slammed into all three of them with the force of an avalanche. Rydor felt his consciousness ripped open, every memory, every emotion suddenly laid bare and bleeding. Beside him, Rylan convulsed, his hand tightening on Rydor's arm hard enough to bruise. Then the visions came. A sterile room with white walls and the smell of antiseptic. A young Myri, no more than 12, strapped to a medical table while healers shook their heads. "The shadow burn is progressing. There's nothing more we can do." The crushing loneliness of being passed from facility to facility, territory to territory, always the broken Omega no one wanted to claim. The visions shifted violently. Fire-consuming wooden structures. Screams echoing through the night. Rydor and Rylan fighting back-to-back as their packmates fell around them. Then the betrayal, their trusted lieutenant, Davrin, standing among enemy wolves, his smile cold as he gave the order to burn the survivors. The weight of failure, the rage, the grief that had consumed 8 years of their lives. But then something impossible happened. Where their blood touched Myri's skin, a golden light began to spread. It moved through her veins like liquid sunlight, pushing back the dark corruption of Shadowburn inch by inch. The light didn't stop there. It flowed up through their arms into their chests, wrapping around the jagged wounds in their souls. The rage that had defined them since the massacre quieted. Not disappeared but transformed into something bearable. Something that didn't claw at them every waking moment. Myri gasped, her back arching off the floor. Her eyes snapped open, no longer fever-bright but glowing with an otherworldly amber light. "I can feel you," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been. Both of you. Everything you've lost. Everything you've survived. And we feel you, Rylan said hoarsely, tears streaming down his face for the first time in 8 years. Your strength. Your will to live despite everything. The golden light intensified, filling the entire circle. Myri's dark veins began to recede, the shadow burn retreating before the combined force of their bond. Her wolf, which had been killing her for months, suddenly surged forward, not in rejection but in joyful recognition. The ritual reached its crescendo. All three of them screamed as the temporary bond locked into place, a living thing that connected their hearts, their minds, their very souls. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the fire subsided. The light faded. The circle went dark except for the hearth's glow. They collapsed together in a tangle of limbs and ragged breathing, alive and fundamentally changed. They woke at dawn, tangled together on the stone floor. Myri stirred first, her body no longer burning with fever. The dark veins that had crawled beneath her skin were gone, leaving only faint silvery traces like old scars. She sat up slowly, testing her limbs, and found strength where there had been only weakness. Rydor and Rylan woke moments later, their twin bond pulling them to consciousness in unison. They exchanged a long look, feeling the new presence in their minds. Myri's consciousness, bright and warm, nestled alongside their own shared thoughts. It worked, she breathed, wonder coloring her voice. I can feel my wolf. 'Tis whole. Before either twin could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the cabin. All three froze. No one had found this place in 8 years. No one should even know it existed. The knock came again, more insistent. Rydor. Rylan. I know you're in there. Open the door before I kick it down. Rylan's eyes widened with recognition. Kale. The name hung in the air like smoke. Kale Ashford, their former beta, one of only 3 wolves who had survived the massacre. The twins had assumed he'd moved on, found another pack, rebuilt his life somewhere far from the ashes of their failure. Rydor stood, pulling on his shirt as he crossed to the door. When he opened it, Kale stood on the threshold, older than they remembered, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His eyes swept past Rydor to land on Myri, still wrapped in the thin shift, her auburn hair disheveled. You actually did it, Kale said quietly, stepping inside uninvited. The twin resonance healing. I felt the surge of power from 20 miles away. Every wolf with any sensitivity felt it. That's impossible, Rylan said, moving to stand between Kale and Myri protectively. The ritual is localized. It doesn't. It does when the Omega is a shadow glow. Kale's gaze fixed on Myri. You have no idea what you've saved, do you? She's not just any Omega dying of shadow burn. She's the last of the shadow glow bloodline. The healers prophesied to unite fractured packs and mend alpha trauma. Myri's hand went to her throat. How do you? Because the Blood Moon Coalition has been hunting you for 3 years. Kale pulled a rolled parchment from his coat, tossing it onto the table. They sent scouts 2 days ago when they tracked your movements to this region. Last night's power surge confirmed your location. They'll be here within the week. Rydor's hands clenched into fists. Then we fight them off. We've held this territory against worse. You can't fight an entire coalition, Kale snapped. They're not coming to kill her, they're coming to take her. To weaponize her healing abilities for their political games. And if you resist, they'll burn this forest to the ground and everyone in it. The cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire. Myri stood on shaky legs, wrapping her arms around herself. What do you suggest? Kale's expression softened slightly. There's neutral territory, Moonhaven. It's a 7-day journey on foot. If you can reach it, the Council of Elders can grant you sanctuary. The Blood Moon Coalition won't risk violating neutral ground, not with the other packs watching. And what's to stop them from ambushing us on the way? Rylan asked. Nothing, Kale admitted. But staying here is certain death. At least on the road you have a chance. Rydor looked at Myri, then at his twin. Through their bond, he felt Rylan's reluctance warring with the same grim acceptance he felt. They'd left the world behind 8 years ago, but the world had found them anyway. There's something else, Kale said, his voice dropping. The Shadow Glow clan saved your grandfather's life during the Blood Wars. Your family owes them a debt, one that was never repaid. If you let her die or fall into enemy hands, That debt passes to the next generation. It will haunt your bloodline forever. Rydor closed his eyes. Of course there was a blood debt. There was always something that made walking away impossible. 7 days, he said finally. We leave at nightfall. Cale nodded, relief flickering across his scarred face. I'll scout ahead, clear the first leg of the route. But after that you're on your own. As the beta disappeared into the morning mist, Myri moved to stand between the twins. Through the bond they felt her fear, but also her determination. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant to bring war to your doorstep. Rydor's hand found hers. We made our choice. Now we see it through. They had 7 days to turn a fragile Omega into a survivor. Rydor started before dawn on the first day, dragging Myri from her bedroll while frost still clung to the windows. If we're attacked, no one will wait for you to be ready, he said, tossing her a wooden training staff. Fight me. She barely had time to catch it before he was on her, moving with brutal efficiency. The staff clattered from her hands within seconds, and she found herself flat on her back, Rydor's hand at her throat. Again, he commanded. They repeated the exercise 20 times. By the end, Myri's hands were blistered and her body ached, but she'd managed to block 3 of his strikes. Through the bond she felt his approval, grudging but real. You're thinking too much, Rydor said, pulling her to her feet. In a real fight you won't have time to plan. You need to let instinct guide you. Your wolf knows how to survive. Trust her. Over the next days he taught her to fight dirty. How to use her smaller size as an advantage, slipping beneath larger opponents' guards. Where to strike to disable rather than kill, throat, knees, eyes. How to use anything as a weapon. Rocks, branches, even handfuls of dirt thrown at the right moment. You'll never overpower an alpha, Rydor told her during their 4th session, both of them breathing hard. So don't try. Be faster, smarter, more vicious than they expect. Ryland's lessons were different, more cerebral. He took her into the forest each afternoon, teaching her to read the language of pack territories. See those claw marks? He pointed to deep gouges in a tree trunk. Fresh, less than 2 days old. An alpha marking his boundary. The height tells you his size. The depth tells you his strength. He showed her how to move through contested territory without triggering territorial instincts, how to identify safe paths versus hunting grounds, how to read the subtle shifts in an alpha's posture that signaled aggression versus dominance displays. Politics will kill you faster than claws, Rylan explained one evening as they studied a map of pack territories. The Blood Moon Coalition wants you as a symbol. The Silvercrest Alliance will want you as leverage. You need to understand what you represent to them before you can protect yourself. But it was the nights that changed everything. The first nightmare hit Rydor on the 3rd day. Myri woke to his thrashing, his face twisted in anguish as he relived the massacre. Without thinking, she pressed her hand to his chest and golden light flickered beneath her palm. The nightmare shattered. Rydor's eyes opened, clear and calm. How did you, he started. I don't know, she whispered. I just felt your pain through the bond. And I wanted to take it away. After that, it became routine. When the twins' shared trauma surfaced in their sleep, Myri was there, her healing touch smoothing the jagged edges of their memories. And when her shadow burn threatened to resurface, a phantom pain in her chest, a flutter of weakness, their presence through the bond anchored her, kept her wolf stable. On the 5th day, during a water break, Rylan caught her hand and studied it. Your healing isn't just emotional, he said quietly. Look. He drew his knife across his palm, a shallow cut. When Myri instinctively reached for him, golden light spread from her fingers. The wound sealed itself within seconds, leaving unblemished skin. You're not just prophesied to heal alpha trauma, Rylan said, wonder in his voice. You can heal physical wounds too. That's why they want you so badly. Myri stared at her hands, feeling the power thrumming beneath her skin. I don't know how to control it. You will, Rydor said, moving to stand beside them. You've learned everything else we've thrown at you. This is just one more skill to master. On the 6th night, as they sat around the fire making final preparations, Myri looked at the twins, these massive, broken alphas who had saved her life and given her purpose. Thank you, she said simply, for not letting me die alone. Rydor's hand found hers. Rylan's settled on her shoulder. Through the bond she felt their response, not words but emotion. Gratitude. Protectiveness. Something deeper they weren't ready to name. Tomorrow we leave, Ryland said. Whatever happens out there, we face it together. Myri nodded, feeling her wolf rise to the surface. Strong, whole, ready. 7 days ago she'd been dying. Now she was a weapon being sharpened for war. And she would not break easily. They left the cabin at dusk, 3 shadows melting into the forest as darkness claimed the mountains. Traveling by night was riskier, but it gave them the advantage of concealment. Most wolves trusted their daytime patrols, leaving the nocturnal hours less guarded. Rydor led, his massive frame moving with surprising silence through the undergrowth. Myri followed in the middle, her newly trained senses alert for danger. Rylan brought up the rear, constantly scanning their back trail for pursuit. The first 2 nights passed without incident. They covered nearly 30 miles, keeping to game trails and avoiding marked territories. Myri's endurance surprised even herself. The bond seemed to amplify her stamina, drawing on the twins' alpha strength when her own flagged. On the 3rd night everything changed. Rylan stopped abruptly, his hand raised in warning. Through the bond Myri felt his alarms spike. "We're being followed," he said quietly. 3 wolves, maybe 4. They've been tracking us for the last mile. Rydor's eyes began to glow with a predatory amber light. Blood moon. Their scent markers were 2 valleys back. We're in their outer territory. Ryland's jaw tightened. They're not attacking yet. They're hurting us. Myri's heart hammered against her ribs. Hurting us where? The answer came when they crested the next ridge. Below them, a ravine cut through the forest like a wound, steep walls on 3 sides, only one narrow exit. And blocking that exit stood 5 wolves in human form, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Rydor and Rylan Vance, the lead wolf called out, his voice carrying across the ravine. He was younger than the twins, maybe 30, with ritual scars marking his face. "The coalition sends its regards. Hand over the Omega and we'll let you walk away. You've been out of pack politics long enough. Don't die for a stranger." Rydor's growl rumbled through the night air. "She's under our protection. Tell your alpha to call off his dogs." The scout laughed. "Your protection? You're exiled alphas living in a cabin like hermits. You have no pack, no territory, no authority. You're nothing." Myri felt Rydor's rage explode through the bond, 8 years of grief and guilt and suppressed violence boiling to the surface. His body began to shift, bones cracking and reforming, his wolf emerging with lethal intent. He would kill them all. Myri knew it with absolute certainty. And once he started, there would be no stopping him. The bloodshed would alert every pack within 50 miles, and their chance of reaching Moonhaven would evaporate. She moved without thinking. Myri stepped directly in front of Rydor, placing both hands on his chest as his transformation reached its peak. Golden light blazed from her palms, flooding through the bond with overwhelming force. "Stop," she commanded, her voice carrying a resonance she didn't know she possessed. "This isn't the fight that matters." The rage in Rydor's eyes flickered, faltered. The transformation reversed, bones snapping back into human configuration. He stood there, trembling with suppressed violence but controlled. The scouts stared, transfixed. One of them stumbled backward, fear written across his face. "She stopped an alpha's killing rage," he whispered. "No one can do that. No one." Rylan moved to Myri's side, his posture protective but non-threatening. "You've seen what she can do. Imagine what the coalition will face if they try to take her by force. Is she really worth dying for?" The lead scout's confidence had evaporated. He exchanged glances with his companions, clearly rattling by what he'd witnessed. "The alpha will hear of this," he said finally, backing toward the tree line. "All of it." "Make sure he does," Myri said, her hands still glowing faintly against Rydor's chest. "Tell him the shadow glow air isn't anyone's weapon. And tell him that anyone who tries to claim me will face both Vance twins, and they're not the broken alphas you remember." The scouts disappeared into the darkness, their retreat swift and undignified. Silence settled over the ravine. Myri's hands finally stopped glowing and she sagged against Rydor, exhaustion hitting her all at once. He caught her automatically, his arms encircling her with surprising gentleness. "You stopped me," he said, wonder and something like fear in his voice. "I've never been able to stop once the rage takes over. Not since the massacre." I know, Myri whispered against his chest. I felt it through the bond. All that pain, all that guilt, it's been driving you for 8 years. But it doesn't have to anymore. Ryland's hand settled on her shoulder. You just showed the Blood Moon Coalition exactly what you're capable of. They'll report to their alpha before dawn. Myri straightened, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. Good. Let them know what they're dealing with. Maybe it'll make them think twice. Ryder's arms tightened around her briefly before releasing her. Or it'll make them want you even more. Then they'll have to go through both of you to get me, Myri said simply. And after 7 days of training, I know exactly how much that will cost them. The twins exchanged a look over her head, their bond pulsing with shared pride and renewed determination. Moonhaven is still 4 days away, Ryland said. We need to move. Now. They climbed out of the ravine and disappeared into the night, 3 souls bound together, moving toward an uncertain future with the certainty that whatever came, they would face it as one. Moonhaven should have been sanctuary. Instead it was occupied. The neutral territory sprawled across a valley where 3 rivers met, its stone buildings arranged in concentric circles around the council hall. Traditionally, no single pack could claim Moonhaven. It belonged to all and none, governed by the Elder Council. But as Rydor, Rylan and Myri approached at dawn on the 7th day, silver banners snapped in the wind from every tower. The Silvercrest Alliance. Here. In neutral territory. This is wrong, Rylan growled, his hand moving instinctively to the blade at his hip. The council would never allow. Unless they had no choice, Rydor finished grimly. Through the bond, Myri felt both twins' tension spike to dangerous levels. They were stopped at the outer gates by guards in silver armor. State your business, the lead guard demanded, though his eyes had already locked onto Myri with unmistakable recognition. We seek sanctuary under the ancient laws, Myri said, keeping her voice steady. I am Myri Shadowglow, last of my bloodline. These are my bonded protectors. The guard's expression shifted. The Alpha has been expecting you. He requests an audience immediately. They were escorted through streets lined with Alliance soldiers, too many for a peaceful occupation. This was a military presence barely disguised. The townsfolk watched from windows and doorways, their faces carefully neutral but their fear palpable. The council hall's great chamber had been converted into a throne room. And seated in the place where the Elder Council should have presided was a face from the twins' nightmares. Alpha Davron hadn't changed much in 8 years. Still lean and sharp-featured. Still wearing that calculating smile that had once fooled them into trusting him. The silver streak in his dark hair was wider now, the only sign of time's passage. Rydor. Rylan. Davron's voice was smooth as poisoned honey. I'd heard you'd crawled out of your cave. And you've brought the Shadowglow heir. How fortuitous. Rydor's hands clenched into fists. Myri felt his rage building again, felt Rylan's matching fury through the bond. This was the man who had betrayed them, who had given the order that massacred their pack, who had smiled as their world burned. We claim sanctuary, Myri said loudly, stepping forward before either twin could speak. Under the ancient laws, Moonhaven must grant us protection. Of course, Davron said, rising from his seat with predatory grace. Moonhaven welcomes all who seek peace. But I must confess concern for your well-being, Lady Shadowglow. You arrive in the company of 2 exiled alphas with troubled histories. How can we be certain you're here of your own free will? Myri's eyes narrowed. I'm exactly where I choose to be. Are you? Davron descended the steps, circling them like a wolf evaluating prey. Or have these broken alphas coerced you with their forbidden ritual? The twin resonance healing creates powerful bonds. Bonds that could easily be mistaken for genuine affection. Some might call it a form of claiming without consent. Watch your words carefully, Rylan said, his voice deadly quiet. Davron ignored him, addressing Myri directly. I can offer you true protection. The Silvercrest Alliance has resources these exiles cannot match. Your healing abilities could bring peace to countless alphas suffering from trauma and rage. Think of the good you could do, properly supported and protected. You mean controlled, Myri said. Used as a political tool to solidify your power. Davron's smile didn't waver. I mean elevated to your proper station. You're prophesied to unite packs, Lady Shadowglow. But that requires political acumen, alliances, strategic positioning. What can two hermit alphas offer you except more isolation and danger? They offer me choice, Myri said coldly. Something you clearly don't understand. The smile finally faded from Davern's face. Then I invoke the trial of claimed intent, he announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. An ancient right when the legitimacy of a bond is questioned. If the Vance twins truly protect you from genuine devotion and not manipulation, they will prove it in the traditional way. Myri felt ice flood her veins. What does the trial entail? You must enter the spirit realm alone while your bonded alphas defend your physical body from 3 of my chosen champions, Davern explained. If your bond is genuine, you will navigate the spirit realm successfully and emerge unharmed. If it's coercion disguised as protection, the realm itself will reject you. And if your protectors fail to defend you, he shrugged. Well, that proves they were never worthy of your trust. This is madness, Rydor snarled. The trial was outlawed 50 years ago because it's a death sentence. Yet it remains in the old laws, Davern countered. And Lady Shadowglow is free to refuse. In which case, I must insist she remain under Silvercrest protection until the council can investigate the circumstances of her bond more thoroughly. For her own safety, you understand. The trap was perfect. Refuse and Myri would be imprisoned, separated from the twins, eventually broken and molded into Davern's political weapon. And they might all die in a rigged trial. Myri met Davern's cold eyes and saw the calculation there. He expected her to refuse, to choose the illusion of safety over risk. We accept the trial, she said clearly. And when we survive it, the Silvercrest Alliance will leave Moonhaven and never threaten me again. Davern's smile returned, sharp as a blade. As you wish, Lady Shadowglow. The trial begins at sunset tomorrow. I do hope you survive it. It would be such a waste of potential otherwise. As guards escorted them to quarters, Myri felt both twins' fear and fury through the bond. They had escaped the Blood Moon Coalition only to walk into something far more dangerous. And Davern, the architect of their greatest tragedy, now held all the cards. Tomorrow would determine whether their bond was strong enough to survive, or whether the man who had destroyed them once would finish what he started 8 years ago. The trial ground was an ancient stone circle at Moonhaven's heart, carved with runes that predated the oldest pacts. Spectators lined the surrounding terraces. Alliance soldiers, nervous townspeople, and members of the Elder Council who had been rendered powerless by Davern's occupation. Myri stood at the circle's center as sunset painted the sky crimson. Rydor and Rylan flanked her, their faces grim. Across from them, 3 of Davern's champions waited. Massive alphas selected for their brutality and skill. The rules are simple, Davern announced from his elevated seat. Lady Shadowglow will drink the spirit root tea and enter the realm beyond. Her bonded protectors will defend her physical body for 1 hour. If she emerges before time expires and the bond remains intact, they pass. If she fails to return or if her protectors fall, she will remain under Silvercrest protection indefinitely. A robed elder approached with a clay cup. Myri took it with steady hands, meeting each twin's gaze in turn. Through the bond, she felt their fear for her, their determination to protect her no matter the cost. I'll find my way back, she promised. I always do. She drank. The tea was bitter, burning down her throat like liquid fire. The world tilted, colors bleeding together, and then she was falling through darkness. The spirit realm materialized around her. A twisted reflection of reality where shadows had weight and emotions took physical form. She stood in a vast empty hall with mirrors lining every wall, each reflecting a different version of herself. Welcome, little Omega, a voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like her own but hollow, mocking. Let's see what you're really worth. The mirrors began to show memories. Myri at 12, watching healers walk away after declaring her incurable. At 15, hearing pack members whisper that she was cursed. At 19, alone in another sterile facility, wondering if anyone would mourn when the shadow burn finally killed her. Unworthy, the voice hissed. Broken. That's what you've always been. That's what you'll always be. Figures emerged from the mirrors, twisted versions of Rydor and Rylan, their faces contorted with disgust. Why did we waste the ritual on you? The false Rydor said. We should have let you die. You're not strong enough to be bonded to alphas like us, the false Rylan added. You're just a burden we're too honorable to abandon. Myri's heart clenched. These were her deepest fears given form and voice. That she wasn't worth saving, that the twins' protection was obligation rather than choice, that she would always be the broken Omega everyone pitied. But then she felt it, a pulse of warmth through the bond. Faint, distant but unmistakably real. Not the false twins surrounding her, but the genuine connection to Rydor and Rylan fighting for her in the physical world. You're wrong, Myri said, her voice gaining strength. I'm not defined by what others thought I was worth. The twins didn't save me out of obligation, they saved me because I refused to give up. And I'm not broken anymore. Golden light blazed from her chest where the bond anchored. The false twins shrieked and dissolved like smoke. The mirrors shattered, revealing a path forward through the darkness. Myri ran. In the physical world, blood stained the stone circle. Rydor had already taken down one champion, the man unconscious and bleeding from a savage strike to the temple. But the other two were proving more difficult. They attacked in coordinated strikes, forcing the twins to defend Myri's unconscious body while fighting for their own lives. Rylan blocked a vicious slash aimed at Myri's throat, but left himself exposed. The champion's blade found its mark, driving deep into Rylan's side just below the ribs. Poison steel designed to slow alpha healing. Rylan staggered but didn't fall. Rydor, he gasped, redirecting the second champion toward his twin. Rydor's roar shook the stone circle. He moved with preternatural speed, rage lending him strength. Within seconds both remaining champions were down, one with a shattered jaw, the other unconscious. But Rylan collapsed, his hand pressed uselessly against the spreading bloodstain on his shirt. The poison was working fast, too fast for even alpha healing to counter. At that moment, Myri's eyes snapped open, glowing with golden light. The bond blazed around all three of them, visible to every witness, a radiant proof of their connection. She sat up, immediately sensing Rylan's injury through the bond. No, she breathed, scrambling to his side. No, hold on. We won, Rylan said weakly, managing a smile. You came back. And you're not leaving, Myri said fiercely. Her hands pressed against his wound, golden light pouring from her palms with desperate intensity. Davrin rose from his seat, his expression carefully neutral, but Myri saw the frustration in his eyes. The trial is complete. The bond is proven genuine. But Myri barely heard him. All her focus was on Rylan, on channeling every ounce of her healing power into drawing out the poison and closing the wound that threatened to take him from her. She'd survived the spirit realm. Now she had to save the alpha who'd helped save her. And she would not fail. The poison was winning. Myri's hands trembled as golden light flickered weakly from her palms. She could feel the toxins spreading through Rylan's bloodstream, designed specifically to resist supernatural healing. His breathing had become shallow, his skin taking on a sickly gray pallor. Someone help him. Myri screamed at the gathered crowd. Healers, there must be healers here. The townspeople looked away. The elder council members sat frozen in their seats, powerless under Davrin's occupation. And the Alliance healers remained motionless, clearly under orders not to intervene. Davrin's voice carried across the stone circle. Unfortunate. I did warn the trial was dangerous. Perhaps if Lady Shadowglow reconsidered my offer of protection, my healers could be persuaded to assist. Go to hell, Rydor snarled, dropping to his knees beside his twin. Through the bond, Myri felt his terror, his rage, his absolute refusal to lose his brother again. Rylan's hand found Myri's, his grip weak. Not your fault, he whispered. We chose this. All of it. Shut up, Myri said, tears streaming down her face. You're not dying. I won't allow it. But her healing light was fading. She didn't know how to draw more power, didn't understand the depths of her own abilities. The training had been too brief, too rushed. She wasn't ready for this. Then Rydor's hand closed over hers, covering both her palm and Rylan's. Use me, he said hoarsely. The bond, it connects all three of us. Take my strength. Myri's eyes widened. I don't know how. Yes, you do. Rydor's gaze locked with hers, absolute certainty in his eyes. You stopped my killing rage. You survived the spirit realm. You've been drawing on our strength since the ritual without even realizing it. Now do it consciously. Take everything I have and use it to save him. Myri closed her eyes, feeling for the bond that connected them. It pulsed like a living thing, 3 threads woven together, each distinct yet inseparable. She'd been pulling on it gently, instinctively. Now she needed to channel it with purpose. She reached deep into the bond and pulled. Power flooded through her like a tidal wave. Rydor gasped, his back arching as his alpha strength poured into Myri's body. But she didn't stop there. She reached further, finding the thread that connected to Rylan even as he lay dying, and she used it as a conduit. Golden light exploded from her hands, so bright that spectators shielded their eyes. Myri channeled both twins' combined alpha strength directly into Rylan's wound, using their power to burn away the poison molecule by molecule. The toxin fought back, but it couldn't withstand the concentrated force of 3 souls working as one. Black smoke rose from the wound as the poison was purged. Flesh knit together at visible speed, the gaping slash sealing itself from the inside out. Rylan's eyes snapped open, no longer dull with approaching death but clear and aware. His hand tightened around Myri's as his wolf surged forward, accepting the healing, welcoming the life being returned to him. The light intensified further, spreading beyond the 3 of them to illuminate the entire stone circle. And in that moment, everyone watching understood what Myri's shadow glow truly was. Not just a healer. Not just a prophesied unifier. She was a conduit for pack bonds themselves, capable of channeling and amplifying the connections between wolves to impossible levels. When the light finally faded, Rylan sat up, whole and healed. Myri collapsed against Rydor, drained but triumphant. And the stone circle stood silent except for the sound of their ragged breathing. Davrin rose slowly from his seat, his expression carefully controlled but his eyes betraying shock. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "I've never seen power like that." "And you never will again," one of the Elder Council members said, standing for the first time since the Alliance occupation began. The old woman's voice carried authority that made even Davrin pause. "The trial is complete. The bond is proven beyond any doubt. Lady Shadowglow and her bonded protectors are granted full sanctuary under Moonhaven's ancient laws." "The Council has no authority while," Davrin began. "The Council has every authority," another elder interrupted, also rising. "You occupied our territory claiming to protect it from threats. But the only threat here is you. The lady has proven her bond genuine and her power beyond coercion. By the old laws she is untouchable." One by one the townspeople stood. Silent support but support nonetheless. Davrin's soldiers shifted uneasily, sensing the tide turning against them. Davrin's jaw tightened. He could order an attack, could try to take Myri by force. But doing so in front of witnesses after she'd passed the trial would unite every pack against the Silvercrest Alliance. "Of course," he said finally, his smile returning but lacking its earlier confidence. "Moonhaven's sanctuary is absolute. The Alliance respects the old laws." He descended from his seat, approaching Myri with measured steps. "But remember, Lady Shadowglow, power like yours will always attract attention. Today I'm your enemy. Tomorrow you may need allies. When that day comes, I hope you'll remember I offered you a choice." "I'll remember you tried to kill my bonded partner," Myri said coldly. "Now get out." Davrin's smile never wavered, but his eyes promised this wasn't over. He gestured to his forces and the Alliance began their withdrawal from Moonhaven, silver banners lowering in defeat. As they disappeared beyond the gates, Myri finally let herself collapse completely, held between the twins who had become her entire world. "We won," Rylan said, still marveling at his healed side. "We survived," Rydor corrected, pulling both of them close. "For now." But as Myri drifted into exhausted sleep, she felt the bond pulse with something new, not just connection but belonging. For the first time in her life she wasn't alone. The first sign came on a quiet morning 7 weeks after the ritual. Myri woke to find dark veins creeping across her wrist, faint, almost invisible but unmistakably there. The shadow burn was returning. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt the bond, once blazing and constant, flickering like a candle in wind. Through the weakening connection she felt Rydor wake in the next room, then Rylan. Their alarms spiked as they sensed what she was feeling. They found each other in the shared common room of the quarters the Council had provided. No words were needed. The truth was written in the dark circles under Myri's eyes, in the haunted look returning to the twins' faces. How long? Myri asked quietly. Days, Rylan said, his hand shaking as he reached for her wrist, examining the veins. Maybe a week at most. The temporary bond is unraveling. Rydor stood at the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. I had nightmares again last night. The massacre. Davrin's betrayal. I haven't dreamed about it since the ritual. And my rage is coming back, Rylan admitted. Yesterday a merchant bumped into me in the market and I nearly shifted. That hasn't happened in weeks. Myri felt tears prick her eyes. They'd found something precious, healing, belonging, peace, and now it was slipping away like water through their fingers. A knock interrupted the heavy silence. Cale entered without waiting for permission, his scarred face grave. You feel it too, he said. Not a question. The bond is breaking, Myri said. I'll go back to dying and they'll go back to drowning in trauma, Rydor finished bitterly. We knew this was temporary. We accepted the price. There's another way, Cale said carefully. The temporary bond was always meant as a bridge, not a permanent solution. But it can be transformed into something lasting. All three turned to stare at him. A formal claiming, Cale continued. During the full moon in a sacred grove with the blessing of the elements. It would make the bond permanent. No more fading, no more temporary measures. But it requires choice. Conscious, uncoerced choice from all three of you. Myri's heart hammered against her ribs. A permanent bond meant forever. No going back. No escape if things went wrong. It meant binding herself to two alphas she'd known for less than 2 months, tying her fate irrevocably to theirs. The full moon is tonight, Rylan said quietly. I know, Cale replied. Which means you need to decide now. All three of you. He left them alone with the weight of the decision. Myri stood, moving to where Rydor remained at the window. What do you want? She asked softly. His jaw worked. What I want doesn't matter. You deserve better than 2 broken alphas with more enemies than allies. That's not what I asked. Rydor turned to face her and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. I want to keep you. I want to wake up every morning and feel your presence in my mind. I want to protect you, stand beside you, watch you reshape the world with that impossible power of yours. His voice dropped. But wanting something doesn't mean I deserve it. Myri turned to Rylan. And you? He crossed the room to stand beside them. I spent 8 years convincing myself I didn't deserve happiness. That the massacre was punishment for failing my pack. Then you stumbled into our forest, dying and defiant, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to hope. He took her hand carefully as if she might vanish. But Rydor's right. You deserve choice without pressure. We'll survive if you walk away. We did it before. Will you? Myri challenged. Because from where I'm standing you're both lying. You survived before. You didn't live. There's a difference. She placed one hand on Rydor's chest, the other on Rylan's. Even through the fading bond she felt their hearts racing in sync. I was dying before I met you, she said. Not just from Shadowburn but from loneliness. From believing I was too broken to be worth loving. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that healing isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to keep fighting anyway. Myri, Rydor started. I'm not finished, she said firmly. You're asking what I deserve. I deserve people who see me as more than a prophecy or a political tool. I deserve alphas who would fight Davrin's champions while I battled my own demons. I deserve partners who would offer me their strength even if it killed them. Her voice softened. I deserve you. Both of you. And I think you deserve me too. The sun had set while they talked. Through the window the full moon began to rise, massive and silver. The grove is waiting, Cale's voice came from the doorway. But only if you're ready. Myri looked between the twins, seeing her own fear and hope reflected in their faces. I'm ready if you are. Rydor's hand covered hers. I'm ready. So am I, Rylan said, his voice rough with emotion. They walked through Moonhaven's streets as the moon climbed higher, 3 souls connected by fraying threads of temporary magic. The sacred grove lay at the town's edge, ancient trees forming a natural cathedral. The Elder Council waited there along with witnesses, townspeople who had stood with them against Davrin, and surprisingly, some younger alphas from neighboring packs who had heard of Myri's power. Myri stood between Rydor and Rylan as the eldest council member began the formal claiming ceremony. The words were ancient, spoken in the old tongue, blessing the union of alphas and omega. When it came time for the vows, Myri spoke first. "I choose you both," she said, her voice carrying through the grove. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you saw me at my weakest and decided I was worth saving anyway. Because you taught me that healing goes both ways." The twins spoke together, their voices harmonizing. "We choose you. We claim you. We bind ourselves to you, not as owners but as equals. Your strength is ours. Your healing is ours. And our protection, our loyalty, our hearts are yours. Forever." The moon reached its peak. The elder raised her hands and ancient magic surged through the grove. The temporary bond didn't just strengthen. It transformed, reforging itself into something permanent and unbreakable. Golden light blazed from all three of them as the claiming completed. Myri gasped as the Shadowburn's creeping darkness vanished completely, burned away by the permanent bond's power. The twins stood straighter, the weight of 8 years of trauma finally lifting from their shoulders. When the light faded, they stood changed, marked, claimed, and for the first time in any of their lives they were truly whole.